2010, a man ordered the murder of a pregnant woman from inside a Texas prison cell, and the order was carried out before anyone on the outside even knew his name. Texas prisons don't just hold dangerous people. They're run by them. Today we're ranking the 5 most powerful prison gangs in Texas, from the one that started with 7 men in a single cell and ended up with the FBI hunting them across 2 countries, to the one that every other gang on this list decided was safer to fear than to fight. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We want to see how far this one travels. And if you want more videos like this, hit like. The gang sitting at number 1 didn't start out to be feared. They just ran out of other options. Number 5. Tango Blast. In January 2002, a Tango Blast member walked into a bathroom at the Robertson unit in Abilene, Texas. Members of Barrio Azteca were waiting inside. He didn't walk out. What followed wasn't a small incident that got handled quietly. It was a statewide gang war. Every Texas prison unit housing both gangs became a problem overnight. By June, Tango Blast had fought back hard enough at the John B. Connolly unit in Kennedy that Barrio Azteca pulled back. Then the Texas Syndicate, the oldest Hispanic prison gang in Texas, been running these yards since the 1970s, looked at what was happening and made their move. They declared war too, killed a Tango Blast member at Connolly unit. Tango Blast was 4 years old. They were fighting 2 of the most established gangs in the Texas prison system simultaneously, and they didn't lose. To understand how, you go back to 1998. Clemens Unit, Brazoria, Texas. A group of Hispanic inmates from Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, and Austin made a simple decision. They didn't want what the established gangs were offering. The Mexican Mafia required you to kill to get in. Kill or be killed to get out. The Texas Syndicate ran on hierarchy, lifetime loyalty, and the understanding that leaving wasn't really an option. These men wanted protection inside. They didn't want a sentence on top of their sentence, so they built something that had never existed in the Texas prison system before. No leader at the top, no constitution, no dues. To join, you served 18 months, and you took a Cora check, a fight against 2 or more members, no tapping out. Survive it, you're in. Get released. Want to walk away? Walk. Nobody follows you. They called themselves the 4 Horsemen first. Then Tangos, because every member tattooed their hometown on their body, and Tango was the word for the town you came from. Then Tango Blast, when the city groups started moving as one. The gangs that declared war in 2002 assumed the loose structure meant they were easy to break. It meant the opposite. When Texas prisons classified a gang as a serious threat, those members went into administrative segregation, a cell, 23 hours a day, cut off from everyone. Tango Blast was too decentralized to classify the same way, so they stayed in general population. They stayed connected. And word spread through every unit in the state. Join Tango Blast. Stay out of isolation. People didn't join because they believed in something. They joined because it was the smarter move. The numbers tell the rest. A few years after starting with almost nothing, TDCJ was tracking close to 5,000 confirmed Tango Blast members. By 2019, that number had crossed 14,000 across Texas. The Texas Syndicate, the same gang that tried to end them in 2002, was officially downgraded on the state's threat assessment in 2016. Tango Blast's Houston chapter moved into the top spot, and then something almost funny happened. The Texas Syndicate, the Mexican Mafia, and the Aryan Brotherhood of Texas, 3 gangs that had spent decades trying to destroy each other, called a truce, a unified front, against Tango Blast. The gang nobody wanted to join had become the thing every other gang was afraid of. On the outside, the federal cases kept coming. In 2008, 13 West Texas Puro Tango Blast members were indicted in Lubbock after a 2-year federal investigation. Cocaine and methamphetamine, moving from Abilene across North Texas. One defendant, Fidel Hernandez Gomez, known as Gordo, was already in custody when they read the charges out loud. In 2016, a member in Victoria named William Chance Wallace had a witness's name posted on Facebook with the word snitch underneath it. He didn't do it himself. He made a call. The threats against that witness started the same day. 15 years, federal prison. In April 2024 in Laredo, a chase hit 100 miles per hour before the driver steered the car directly into the Rio Grande and swam across to Mexico. The Texas Department of Public Safety's official language describes Tango Blast as a loose affiliation with little to no detectable leadership hierarchy. 14,000 members, no rulebook, no one in charge. The History Channel sent a crew to film an episode about them. There was no one to call for permission. Number 4. Texas Syndicate. On January 29, 2009, the state of Texas put Ricardo Ortiz to death by lethal injection for a murder he committed in 1997. He was a high-ranking member of the Texas Syndicate. The gang did not hold a funeral. They did not miss a beat. Nobody scrambled. Nobody panicked. Because the Texas Syndicate is not a gang that runs on personalities. It runs on a system, and the system does not care who's alive and who isn't. The gang started at Folsom State Prison in California, sometime in the early 1970s. Two men, Juan Pajaro Solis Vela and Francisco Panchito Gonzalez, put it together. Not because they wanted power, because Texas inmates in California prisons were getting beaten, extorted, and worse by the Mexican Mafia, the Aryan Brotherhood, and anyone else who saw men far from home as easy targets. So they organized. They gave themselves a name. They called each other carnal. Brother. That word mattered. It still does. When those men got out and came back to Texas, the gang came with them. And then in 1983, a federal court ruling called Ruiz versus Estelle accidentally handed the Texas Syndicate more power than they could have taken on their own. The ruling forced Texas prisons to get rid of a system where certain inmates, called building tenders, helped guards keep order. When that ended, every major Texas prison had a hole where its authority used to be. The Texas Syndicate filled it. Between March 1983 and September 1985, their documented membership inside Texas prisons went from 56 people to 296 in 2 years. What they did with that position was not subtle. On September 8, 1985, at the Darrington unit in Rocheron, Texas, two syndicate members, Lear Castro and Rogelio Cantu, walked into a prison day room and stabbed 3 Texas Mexican Mafia members to death. Lloyd Vasquez, Jose Arturo Garcia, Albert Carrillo, all 3 in one evening. Guards found an 8-inch sharpened piece of metal and a boning knife at the scene. The next day, at the Ramsey 2 unit, 2 inmates started a fight in a common area. Officers responded. While everyone was dealing with the fight, in a room next door, a man named Leonel Perez was being stabbed 15 times. By the time anyone got to him, it was done. The fight was staged. It was a distraction. The killing next door was the actual plan. These were not 2 gangs running into each other in a hallway. The Texas Syndicate had formally declared war on the Texas Mexican Mafia the year before, in 1984. What happened at Darrington and Ramsey 2 was the war being carried out on schedule. Now, here is the part that most people don't know about, and it's the part that actually explains how this gang works. When a Texas Syndicate member gets out of prison, he does not get to walk away. He is required to contact the highest-ranking syndicate member in whatever city he moves to, check in, and start paying. 10% of everything he earns, legal job, drug money, anything, goes back to the gang inside. They call it the dime. The people locked up are being funded by the people walking free. The prison gang and the street operation are the same organization, running at the same time, in both directions. That structure is also why the cartel connection matters more than it might seem. A member who gets out of Huntsville and moves to Laredo isn't just a former inmate trying to stay connected to his old crew. He is a node in a supply chain that runs from Mexico to Texas to wherever the drugs go next. The Texas Syndicate has maintained working relationships with the Gulf Cartel and carried out contract killings for Los Zetas. In 2007, a senior member named Ernesto Medrano was sentenced to life after using U.S. military flights to move hundreds of kilograms of cocaine from Colombia to Fort Bliss, a U.S. Army base. The cocaine landed on a military runway. In June 2008, a 27-year-old woman named Rose Ann Martinez was killed in San Antonio. She was a mother of 3. The Texas Syndicate had decided she crossed a line. They ordered one of their members, Magdaleno Medina, to kidnap and kill her. He did. Nobody in the gang lost sleep over it. The rules were the rules. That is what the internal code looks like in practice. Members who break rules are labeled muleta, a problem. Once you get that label, you get a green light. In July 2007, a man named Marcelino Mars Rodriguez Torres turned up burned in Hidalgo County. He had been helping federal investigators build a case against the gang. They had figured it out before the case ever went to trial. Number 3. Aryan Brotherhood of Texas. In March 1985, a man named Virgil Barfield stabbed Calvin Massey 42 times. Massey wasn't a rival. He wasn't an informant. He had gotten an ABT tattoo before he was officially accepted into the gang. That was the rule he broke, and 42 stab wounds was the response. The whole thing was recorded on a security camera. That tape later put Barfield in prison for life. That's not a story about how violent this gang is. That's a story about how seriously they take paperwork. The Aryan Brotherhood of Texas, the ABT, was born out of a court ruling. In the 1970s, Texas prisons ran on what was called the building tender system. Certain inmates, mostly white, were given real authority over other prisoners. They could hand out physical punishment. They had status, protection, and power. Then in 1980, a federal court ruling ended the system overnight. The white inmates who had spent years at the top of that system had nothing. In 1981, a group of them reached out to the Aryan Brotherhood, the original gang out of California. California said no, so they built their own. What they built looked, from the outside, like another white supremacist prison gang. What it actually was something closer to a regional corporation with a constitution, a chain of command, and a written policy on when to kill people. The structure runs like this. 5 men, called generals, sit at the top, collectively known as the steering committee, or the wheel. Each general controls one region of Texas, not just the prisons, the cities too. Each has 2 majors, one inside the prison walls, one on the street. Below them, captains run individual units. Lieutenants handle day-to-day operations. Everyone has a rank and a territory. Orders travel down as direct orders, DOs. An assault order is called SOS, smash on sight. A kill order comes down the same way. A DO with an X placed next to someone's name, passed from general to major to captain until it reaches whoever is expected to carry it out. When those orders come down, they get carried out. Often by prospects, men still trying to earn full membership, because earning that membership typically requires what the gang calls a blood tie, a serious assault, or a murder done on behalf of the organization. Most gangs have violence. The ABT has a process for it. In 2001, a former ABT member named Mark Stroman walked into a Texas gas station and shot a Bangladeshi immigrant named Waqar Hassan. It was 3 weeks after September 11th. Stroman thought he was retaliating against Muslims. Hassan was not Muslim. He was a husband and father who had immigrated from Pakistan and was working behind a register in Dallas. It didn't matter to Stroman, who went on to shoot 2 more people in the following days. What's worth noting here isn't just the act. It's that Stroman operated alone, outside any formal gang order, fueled by an ideology the ABT had spent years embedding in its members. And that ideology worked exactly as intended, on a man who was no longer even inside a prison. In 2012, the Justice Department indicted 34 ABT members, including 4 of the 5 sitting generals. The operation had taken 3 years and involved over a dozen federal and state agencies. The generals' names were Terry Ross Blake, Larry Max Bryan, William David Maynard, and Charles Lee Roberts. Roberts, when he pleaded guilty, admitted involvement in 6 murders. In one of them, the killers cut off the victim's finger and sent it back to the general who had ordered the hit. Confirmation of completion. By the time the prosecutions concluded in 2016, 73 people had been convicted across 5 federal districts. Every active general was among them. Most people, when they think of a white supremacist prison gang, picture something loud. Shaved heads, visible tattoos, men who look the part. The ABT actively discourages that. Members on the outside are expected to blend in, to look like people from the suburbs, to hold jobs, to avoid the ink that would get them flagged by corrections officers inside. As one former member said in a 2009 interview, "There's ABT in every town in Texas. You may not even realize it." That's the thing about an organization with a constitution, a ranked command structure, written orders, and a deliberate policy of looking ordinary. You don't have to look dangerous to be dangerous. You just have to be organized. Number 2. Mexikanemi, TMM. In 1999, a woman named Juanita Ibarra was selling marijuana out of her home in San Antonio, Texas. She refused to hand over 10% of her earnings to the Texas Mexican Mafia. A gang member named Manuel Vasquez came to her house and strangled her to death with a phone cord. He was later sentenced to death for it. The point isn't that he killed her. The point is that under the gang's own written rules, he was supposed to. That rule, 10% of everything from everyone, is called the dime. The Texas Syndicate used a version of this too, but theirs was aimed at members, a cut collected from brothers after they got out of prison. Mexikanemi's version works differently. It applies to every drug dealer, every pimp, every criminal, running any kind of operation inside their territory. Member or not, affiliated or not. You don't have to know anyone in the gang. If you're making money in their area, you owe them 10%. That's the business model, not one big heist. 10 cents on every dollar, collected every day across the entire state of Texas. Mexikanemi, also known as the Texas Mexican Mafia, or just La M, was founded in 1984 inside a prison in Huntsville, Texas. A man named Heriberto Herb Huerta started it. He was already serving 3 life sentences for murder conspiracy and racketeering when he wrote the gang's constitution from his prison cell. He actually asked permission from the California Mexican Mafia to set up a Texas branch. They said yes. He wrote the rules. Those rules have governed the organization ever since. The Constitution is worth stopping on, because this is what separates Mexikanemi from most prison gangs. They put it in writing. The document states, and this appeared word for word in federal court records, that the organization will deal in drugs, contract killing, large-scale robbery, gambling, weapons, and in everything imaginable. That's not what investigators suspected the gang was doing. That's what the gang wrote down about itself, signed off on, and distributed to members. Federal prosecutors later used the actual Constitution as evidence in court. The gang handed them a mission statement. The hierarchy runs: President, Vice President, General, Captain, Lieutenant, Sergeant, and then soldiers at the bottom. What members call their brothers. New members go through a 120-day process. At 90 days, the local lieutenant runs a background check on the prospect. Then there's a full vote. Anyone who skips the vote has to explain why in writing. It reads like onboarding at a mid-sized company, except the job interview usually involves committing a felony on the gang's behalf. And once you're in, there's no resignation letter. The only exit is death, yours or someone else's arranging it. By the early 2000s, Mexikanemi was working directly with the Gulf Cartel, the Sinaloa Cartel, the Juarez Cartel, and Los Zetas, at the same time, not one after another. What that meant in practice, the cartels moved bulk product across the border, and Mexikanemi handled distribution on the Texas side, both inside prison and out. The gang didn't just sell drugs. It taxed everyone else selling them, protected cartel-approved dealers from competition, and enforced those arrangements with violence. That's not a street gang with cartel connections. That's a subcontractor with a monopoly. The violence is real and specific. On August 8, 1997, 5 people were shot dead inside a house on West French Place in San Antonio. That massacre became the centerpiece of a 1998 federal indictment that brought down Robert Beaver Perez, a Mexikanemi general, along with 15 other members. Then in 2008, federal prosecutors announced charges against 23 Mexikanemi leaders, covering 22 murders committed between 2000 and 2005, all in San Antonio. Florencio Vasquez in September 2000, Anthony Blanco in November 2000, Ernest Guzman in May 2002, Jesse Medina in February 2004. 12 names on a list that kept going. By the time that indictment dropped, the U.S. Attorney's Office had already put over 130 Mexikanemi members in federal prison since 2004 alone. The organization has been under continuous federal prosecution in the Western District of Texas since 1991. That's over 30 years of indictments, convictions, and sentences ranging from decades to life. And the dime is still being collected. Huerta wrote the whole thing from a prison cell. Decades later, the money was still finding its way back to him. Number 1. Barrio Azteca. On March 13, 2010, a man named Eduardo Ravelo sat in Ciudad Juarez and listened to a radio. He wasn't driving. He wasn't shooting. He was just listening, monitoring communications, while his crew tracked 2 cars carrying people connected to the U.S. consulate. When the cars were in position, his men opened fire. 3 people died. Leslie Ann Enriquez Caton, a consulate employee who was 4 months pregnant. Her husband, Arthur Redelfs. And Jorge Alberto Salcido Cenicheros, the husband of another consulate employee. Their children were in the cars. The children survived. Ravelo went into hiding. The FBI put him on their 10 most wanted list. He stayed there for 9 years. He was extradited to the United States in February 2025. He pleaded guilty in December 2025. 15 years after the murders, he finally sat in a courtroom in El Paso and answered for them. Here's the part that's worth understanding. Ravelo didn't start out as a cartel boss. He started out as a Texas prison inmate back in 1986 at the Caulfield Unit, a state prison near Tennessee Colony, Texas. 7 men from El Paso's Segundo Barrio decided to stop getting pushed around. The Texas Syndicate ran things. The Mexican Mafia ran things. Nobody was running things on behalf of the guys from El Paso. So Benito Benny Acosta, Alberto Indio Estrada, Benjamin T-Top Olivares, Manuel El Grande Fernandez, and 3 others started their own group. They called it Barrio Azteca. For the first few years, the older gangs refused to recognize them. In 1988, the Mexican Mafia started a war with them at the Caulfield Unit. In 1993, Barrio Azteca members beat and strangled a Texas Syndicate member to death inside the El Paso County Jail, which caused both the Texas Syndicate and the Mexican Mafia to team up against them at the same time. 2 established gangs, 1 new one. Most groups don't survive that. By July 1997, the Texas Syndicate and the Mexican Mafia signed a peace treaty with Barrio Azteca. The gang that started with 7 people had become something the older gangs decided was better to live with than to keep fighting. That's when they started getting interesting in a different way. As members were released from prison, they went back to El Paso and across the bridge to Ciudad Juarez. They brought structure, loyalty, and a demonstrated willingness to kill. The Juarez cartel, which at the time controlled drug routes that moved roughly 70% of the cocaine entering the United States, took notice. By the early 2000s, Barrio Azteca had become La Linea, the cartel's enforcement arm. They moved drugs. They collected payments. They killed people the cartel needed killed. In return, the cartel gave them product at discounted prices and let them run distribution on the El Paso side of the border. What makes this arrangement different from most gang cartel relationships is geography and citizenship. Most Barrio Azteca members hold U.S. passports. They can cross the border freely, commit a murder in Juarez in the morning, and be back in Texas by the afternoon. Law enforcement on one side has a hard time building a case for something that happened on the other side. Barrio Azteca was designed, whether intentionally or not, to exploit exactly that gap. In January 2010, 2 months before the consulate killings, Barrio Azteca members opened fire on a house party in the Villas de Salvarcar neighborhood of Juarez. 15 teenagers were killed. A gang leader had been told that rival members were at the party. They weren't. 15 kids who had nothing to do with any cartel died because of bad information, and nobody who felt like double-checking it. The federal indictment that came out in March 2011 charged 35 Barrio Azteca members with racketeering, murder, drug trafficking, extortion, and money laundering. Of those 35, all have been apprehended. 28 pleaded guilty. 3 were convicted at trial. 1 killed himself before the verdict. Eduardo Ravello was the last one standing. Leslie Enriquez was 4 months pregnant. That detail appears once in most news reports, usually in the second paragraph, and then gets left behind.